right, welcome to the show, Amir. How you doing on this lovely Friday? I can hear you if you can hear me.
What's going on, yo?
All right, awesome, man.
So,
Make sure you talk as loud as you can and into the microphone as possible. Introduce yourself and tell people what you do, my friend.
I'm AMIR ESHAFRAH, and usually study Hebrew and Levantine Arabic and other old Semitic languages. Well, more particularly with Hebrew and occasionally Ugaritic on my own personal time, and if work doesn't get in the way. But yeah, pretty much an amateur linguist, like Abu, in essence.
How'd you get into that, man?
Uh, I first started looking into the Jewish roots of Christianity and picked up some Hebrew from there. First start off with modern Hebrew, and that was the starting point. Started getting to biblical Hebrew and Levantine Arabic. Well, that was a later thing because a lot of my friends were from the Levant, Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian, and Jordanian, and the dialect there is its own thing. And also picked up well, it was also through that I learned there was a difference between written Arabic and spoken Arabic, and yeah, and found that spoken Arabic is more similar to biblical. It's more similar to Hebrew, and because Levantine Arabic has Aramaic mixed with Arabic in it, so yeah. But generally, it was also because I went to a Messianic congregation for so long and picked up from that, and also Michael Heiser, and also study a bit of ancient Near East as well.
Nice. Well, I mean, I've been seeing you online for a long time, years now, really. And you've always brought interesting perspectives, unique information, and have brought a lot of helpful resources, and, have become a resource yourself. So kudos on that, and I think that's what we're going to try to do today. Today is a live stream, and we're going to be interacting with some things, and I think it'll be helpful for people. And part of what today is about, it's not about mudslinging or anything like that, but part of what today is about is just sort of the fact-checking element of apologetics. And so sometimes, especially I think in urban apologetics, there can be a tendency for a lot of bluster and maybe even bluffing. And to a certain extent, you're online, and then there's a certain element involved in which I think there's some allowance of that. I think there's a certain kind of leeway. People understand the context. And so I think we have, generally speaking, kind of a level of understanding of that. There's their videos. There's a element of entertainment. It's not just education, for example. And so I try to be charitable in that. But then with all that being said, people sometimes they overstate things, and they can go they can state things beyond where they are, and they can overstate their abilities and overstate their learning and kind of sell themselves as something they're not. And we can all make that mistake because it's easy to let our ego go like this and center ourselves as the hero of the story and the only one who, that kind of thing. So I think we all can relate to that problem. That's a sin problem, right? I mean, that's ultimately what idolatry, that's the root of it, is that pride we have. Well, using that as a preface is just to say, I have always in the past spoken highly of the man we're going to be talking about today, Zion Lex. And I always have. And recently he took umbrage about something I said to him, or about him, to Michael Heiser, and thought it was a backhanded compliment kind of thing, and then did a bunch of stuff. And then I put up some older videos by our friends Adam and the Bodega Squad, and of course a BK Apologist, that I felt he never really responded to. So I wanted to put those out and say, look, there's problems with Zion's methodology and his conclusions about some of these key issues. And it was all respectful. And then there was a couple low points and low moments as far as things he did. I'm not going to talk about that right now because I'm going to get right into the information. But I've had to recalibrate my own perspective. You learn and you grow. And part of that part of the recalibration also has to do with facility with Hebrew. I don't go around acting like, yo, I'm the guy with the languages. And if that's your thing and you overstate the case and then you make basic mistakes, maybe on a frequent basis, it's just like, let's be sober-minded. That's the way the New Testament writers put it in the English translation, be sober-minded. And part of that is a proper assessment of who you are and where you're at. And hopefully today is a chance for all of us together, including Zion Lex, the man whose mistakes and oversights we're going to point out today. Hopefully it's a time for growth for him as well. And so with that, Amir, I've got some clips. Do you want to give any preface before I play the first clip?
Yeah. Like you've come across Zion Lex here and there, particularly certain claims he made, certain ones, particularly with Genesis 1. He claims it's an esoteric interpretation. And yeah, just noticed some mistakes as well, like noted. And like you noted as well, it's also fact-checking claims, because this is not, and actually both of us are making this very clear, this is not an attack on Zion Lex. This is an attack on claims by Zion Lex. The two are not synonymous.
No doubt. Shout out to the live chat, servant of Christ, ex-Hebrew Israelite himself. What's up, brother? Shout out to D New, killing it out here in the editing and moderating game. C and B in the house. LeBron Jeremiah, how you doing? Kim McCracken, how you doing? SLC, like I said, Basic in the house. And who else we got up in here? We also got Mr. Phil Fox, R2, Les Hunter, and Nimash, MJ Jackson. Some of y'all's names, man. Some of y'all's names, I don't know what to do with them. But that's all right. Okay, I'm going to play this first clip, and I'm going to let you comment. Let's get into it.
His next question was, why is it that Zion Lex says, Bereshit bara Elohim means in the beginning he created God? I mean, that's absurd, Zion Lex. Why would you do that? See, Zion is pseudo. Well, you got Zion on the line, and he definitely not pseudo now that he's on the line with you. In fact, it's clear who the novice is, and it's you, the self-taught one. Moving on.
Let me just stop there. So the audio was a little quiet in the beginning. I want to make sure everyone can hear it before I proceed any further. And I'm also going to make myself, make sure I'm not in the way of any of the text. So I'm going to move that. But just in that clip that I've paused, and this is not the point of what we're doing, but I want to bring it out. I mean, I think it's obvious at the same time about, you know, the kind of blustery nature of Mr. Zion Lex. It's evident who's the novice and who's the self-taught one. You know, these constant refrains. I don't know if there's a need for that. I mean, we know that Zion Lex doesn't. It was quiet, but we could hear it. Okay, sorry. Well, I'm just saying I don't really understand how that benefits the conversation at all. But I want to make sure, Amir, can you hear the audio and you know what the context is? Because I'm going to play the rest of it. I just want to make sure everything's kosher.
Yeah, I heard it, and yeah, I know where this is from.
Okay, well, you provided it. I just want to make sure you know which clip I'm playing. But yeah, can you give the context? What the context of this clip?
For the audience, this clip that was played, it was from a discussion that Zion Lex had with a Semiticist on dagesh Squad's channel over a year ago. The best way to describe it, it was the funeral of Zion Lex's career.
Really? You think
that's the best way I could surmise it.
Really fascinating. Is that a term that is going around now? I had not heard that before yet. That phrase.
Well, right around the end of the debate, that discussion, when Zion left, there was a picture put up with a tombstone, "Rest in peace, Zion Lex." So
you're not the only one. Okay. Okay. Well, let me play the rest of this here. It is going to be a little quiet here, but so here's the debate that was on Garfield Breed's channel with the Semiticists from the Dagger Squad. Here we go.
In the word Bereshit bara Elohim, or in the sentence Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve et haaretz, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, that's a very baseline interpretation. Why do I say baseline? Anybody who really understands biblical Hebrew syntax and grammar knows that that's not a perfect transliteration of Bereshit bara Elohim. For instance, the T at the end, the tav, would really make it beginning of, and not simply in the beginning. It's in the beginning of. The tav at the end makes it in the beginning of, and not simply in the beginning. Furthermore, there's a nikud underneath the bait, and that nikud is shawah. That can mean in or with. It's a preposition. If that nikud, or that vowel sign indicator, the dot, if that was a kamatz or patak, it would mean in the or with the, meaning it would carry the meaning of the definite article. But the sages of the Masoretic text do not use the patak nor the kamatz. They simply use the shawah.
I'm gonna pause it there. It's there's still some time left, but I want to make sure we don't get the audience too much information at once. Do we want to comment on anything yet, or do you want to play the rest of the clip?
Yeah, particularly with his comment of Bereshit. He's claiming that the tav at the end of Bereshit is a tav of construct, that this is a noun in the construct state, in the beginning of, but Zion's just really question begging with that one, because he's not really accounting as to how or why that is the case. The other thing is, just to note, Reshit, either in its absolute state or in the construct state, it's usually what's in the construct state, it'll have a makef, like where it says right here, al-paneh. Al-paneh, it's ayin lamed, and you'll see like a line in between al and paneh. Usually when Reshit is in the construct state, it'll have a makef right there to distinguish it. So he's really not giving a justification for why the Reshit is in a construct state. The tav right there, because Reshit is a feminine noun, a abstract feminine noun, and the sheet and the it ending is an indication of that. And he claims that this is not a good transliteration. That may have just been a slip up on his end.
He should have said translation, right?
No, he said transliteration.
I know, but why'd you say transliteration?
Yeah. It may have just been a brain fart moment on his end, probably from being flustered by myths. I don't know.
But I'm saying he should have said translation.
Yeah, that's what he should have said. But
yeah, okay.
it may have just been a slip up on his end by mistake. I don't know. But he's claiming this is not a good. I guess he's saying this is not a good translation. Well, if he's talking about the being there, he may have a case, because Bereshit, the bait right there is the inseparable preposition in, at, on, and it's prefixed to Reshit, start, beginning, first, at the start, or at start, or at first. It just means it's a temporal moment at a specific point at first in the beginning. So he may have a case with that instance, but you could still translate it that way. The issue is that what you see, the vowel under the bait, it's a schwa, indicating that it's not definite. So he would have a case right there, but for the rest of it, he's going to run into a problem grammatically and syntactically.
What would you say the main thing is, the main claim that Zion Lex is trying to make here? What's the main point that he was trying to get across?
He's trying to ignore just the basic grammatical and syntactical meaning for an esoteric one, meaning in the beginning he's translated this way. He's trying to say esoterically, it makes better sense that in the beginning he created gods, particularly Bereshit bara Elohim. There's a problem.
So he's trying to say that a mystical interpretation based upon the Hebrew will have you believe that in the beginning God created gods.
Well, he says God specifically.
Oh, in the beginning, gods created.
Oh, yeah, basically. And he tries to contrast that with the Medunecha, the divine words, like ancient Egyptian creation, where you have Nu being self-created,
So
something like that.
he's trying to draw, because I've seen Zion Lex do this before, where he tries to build bridges that he tries to build bridges in places where I'm not sure if you can build bridges with the Kemetic folks on like Sonnet, the ones who may appear on Sonnet's platform. And is that what is going on here? He's trying to build a bridge, but it seems as if the bridge is over. The bridge is made with faulty materials.
Yeah, he's trying to build bridges from the Hebrew text, but the problem is he's ignoring in order for this bridge to work, he has to ignore grammar and syntax in order for it to work.
That's why he's pushing for a mystical interpretation.
Basically, yeah. Well, he's getting this from the Zohar. I remember somebody remarking, because actually Abu pointed that out a while back. Because when I first saw the first video he made on this on Sadna's channel, I was like, wait, I've heard this before. And it sounds similar to what Joseph Smith said about Genesis 1:1 in the Hebrew. Joseph Smith.
But Joseph Smith didn't know any Hebrew, but he did have gods in the very beginning. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, Joseph Smith, yeah, his vocalization was horrible and Paleo-Babble rubbish. Joseph Smith's interpretation has it more like the head of the gods created gods in the beginning.
Yeah, I believe that's from the Book of Abraham, right?
No, it's in a lecture he gave.
Oh, it's in a lecture.
It was in a sermon. Sorry, yeah, it was in a sermon.
About the King Follett discourse.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a man named whose actually name was King Follett died because apparently a stone fell on him, and at his funeral, Joseph used it, the funeral kind of eulogy, as a speech to unveil new doctrine. So it's a very famous thing that he did here. And you're saying that what Joseph Smith did is similar to what you see Zion Lex trying to do, which is interesting because Joseph Smith was interested in, well, a lot of Americans were interested, in fact, maybe obsessed. There's books about it called Egyptomania, where he ended up buying some texts in Kirtland, Ohio, that were ancient Egyptian documents, and then says he translated them, and that's where you get the Book of Abraham and things like that. And years later, after fire and all this kind of stuff, we got the text he got and found out it was just basically part of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and he even messed up the drawing on it, whole thing. But we're not saying Zion Lex is that bad, but going off a little bit there. But help me understand, Amir. Is this mean at the end of the day Zion Lex is not really a monotheist? I don't know where all he goes with this. Is that the cash value of this?
That is, I mean, if you're saying in the beginning he created God and that Elohim has a higher God above himself, then yeah, you're not really a monotheist. You're really, you're either a monolatrist or
henotheist, maybe?
Possibly, yeah. Well, I want to say he's a monolatrist because he's worshiping a very specific deity in exclusion of all others.
Yeah, see, that's fascinating because, so I have 4 Zion Lex books, and one of them is Ancient Kemet on Trial, a meticulous look at the true origin of Kemetic culture and religion. And, the book, I think it has elements that are, you could say, critical of Kemetic claims, but then you also find him, trying to do bridge building with, as we're seeing, shoddy materials. Well, I appreciate the explanation. Let me play the rest of this clip.
Which is why it's translated as, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But as I'm saying, and I'm about to demonstrate, that's a very, very baseline interpretation. And what I mean by baseline interpretation is that while the interpretation is certainly sufficient to understand the overall meaning and context of what's happening, With all spiritual texts, there's also an esoteric meaning. When I first gave this explanation on Sunday the TV, I made it extremely clear that this explanation is esoteric. If it's esoteric, why should you expect that it follows the rules of grammar? Would that make any damn sense? I said it was esoteric. That which is esoteric follows not formality.
Oh.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, and also, Zion has went to the trouble of, of studying Hebrew and learning some rules of grammar and so it's weird then to put in that work only to throw it away, to get the ultimate meaning of the text in a sense. It's a strange set of moves. And it's like, guys, listen to that clip, because he's saying you should not expect my interpretation to follow the rules of grammar that you find in the text we are reading. Well, then if that's the case, what is it derived from? And, this rule of all spiritual texts have an esoteric meaning. Spiritual text, tell me what that is. What's a spiritual text? What's not a spiritual text? Like, how do you define that? And then all of them, who told you they all have an esoteric meaning? Or did you get esoteric to get that? This is part of a whole kind of wall of assumptions built into this. But go ahead, Amir. This is your clip, so I don't want to bogart on it.
Yeah, he just stated himself. This is just an esoteric interpretation, and it's not in agreement with the grammar and syntax. Well, in that case, what reason can you give for anybody to really accept this hermeneutical approach or interpretation? It doesn't explain anything. It's just one you're thinking off the fly. And when we're looking at literature, especially the biblical corpus, and we're wanting to interpret it, we're wanting a hermeneutical approach. Well, we're wanting an interpretation that is simple, requires the least amount of ad hoc adjustments, and is more parsimonious, and is best in concord with the grammar and syntax. And Zion Lex already just stated his doesn't agree with either one, so just invoke Occam's razor, and we don't need that hypothesis. It's superfluous. And just a little comment, Hebrew grammar dictates that, because ancient Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, is a verb subject object language. The verb precedes the subject. And what we see here is bara, the verb, third person masculine, singular, perfect. And the subject is preceding it, Elohim, God created, fashioned. And you have what precedes Elohim, et hashamayim wa et haaretz. And those ets right there are accusative object markers, indicating that these are objects being acted upon by the subject of this verb. So, again, Zion Lex's approach doesn't explain any of that. For his interpretation to hold water, it would require the accusative object marker et to precede Elohim. It would make Elohim an object being acted upon. That's not what we see. Therefore, the interpretation Zion Lex is giving is rubbish, bollocks.
I'm running into this more and more. I don't know if we almost want to call it a Hebrew Israelite Gnosticism, where they're putting forth secret meanings and interpretations that are beyond the baseline. Because notice he said, well, that's a baseline interpretation, but it's like, here's this A level of knowledge or information, but to go to Z, you gotta know this esoteric. I mean, this is almost if you know much about Gnosticism, to the audience, it's kind of what's going on here. Let me play the rest of this clip here.
Hence why it's framed esoteric as opposed to exoteric, that which is revealed. It is esoteric, concealed. If it's concealed, then the simple formalities of grammar wouldn't agree with it. But again, common sense isn't so common. So
You know, I don't use this term because it's too popular nowadays, but talk about gaslighting the audience. What's wrong with you? Why would you expect my interpretation to follow the rules of grammar? You don't have common sense.
Yeah. Zion in this discussion, and I've heard him say this in other clips as well, other parts of his videos. He really tries to portray himself as the authority, the genius, and all you other idiotic underlings need to learn from him. That's what he was getting. That's what he was doing right here. Gaslighting his audience, tell them they're stupid. They don't know Hebrew. I do. So shut up and learn from me.
But I mean, what's the point of knowing Hebrew if you're going to throw away the rules of grammar in order to get an esoteric interpretation?
I know, right? That's literally incoherent and nonsense. And bear in mind, this is something you mentioned earlier about him knowing grammar. Zion Lex learned Hebrew from Instagram posts, Facebook posts, internet mores, teachers, etc. And this is not really, I'm not trying to commit ad hom, but because again, this is attack on the premises, the arguments, not him. But you're claiming to be an authority. When you claim to be authority, you're giving the a portrayal that you actually know the intricacies of the Hebrew language, and then entails grammar and syntax. But if you just make a slip up, like say you make a claim like about a specific noun and words, and they don't line up with reality of the language, then that's just going to really weaken your claim.
Right. And because notice in the beginning, he told the other guy he was a novice who was self-taught. You know, a little quick commentary on Genesis 1:1 I want to offer everybody. You know, you look at this, and sometimes people will take this as a summary, which like introduces the whole passage, which is not necessarily in contradiction to what I think it's really getting at, which is more to be understood sort of as the first event. You know, this is the origin, everybody, of the heavens and the earth. And so that would include, you know, to put it maybe in more modern parlance, this would be the creation of matter, space, time. Sometimes people might put energy in there as well, but all those elements that are fundamental to reality. And so when we look at this, the origin of everything, and that's really what heaven and earth there mean. It's sort of a Hebraic way to talk about everything. You do see that confirmed by the writers of the New Testament. Now, Zion Lex may say, well, you know, I'm not a New Testament guy, but understand they were, of course, Israelites. Hebrews 11:3, Revelation 4:11, for example. Now, God created. Now, it is true in that phrase that Elohim is plural. It is plural in form. And there's debates about why that is. Sometimes you hear people maybe say to express majesty. Some people say hinting towards the triune nature of God. But the verb create, and here's the key, is singular. And what does that show? This shows that God is to be understood as one being. And Genesis is consistently, all the way through, truly monotheistic. Now, that's different, you know, when you come down later into the New Testament situation than Unitarianism, but clearly Genesis affirms a monotheistic account of God, meaning truly only one God. Now, this stands in contradistinction to what Zion Lex is really promoting here with his admittedly esoteric interpretation. And so you look at other ancient Near Eastern accounts of creation, and I don't even really like calling them creation accounts. They're really more like origin myths, because they always kind of start with something in some way versus the self-existent God who then brings everything out of nothing, which is called creatio ex nihilo. It's Latin for, you know, out of nothing. You look, and here in Hebrew, we've got one God, and he bara, creates. And who's always used with the subject of that? It is God himself. And we can see that God is sovereign in his power from this. And to reiterate, heaven and earth in Genesis 1:1 means everything. So when we think about in the beginning, this refers to the beginning of everything. Obviously not the beginning of God himself, who is understood to be I am. Yahweh, right? And so when you look at this, God created everything in the universe, if we understand or define the universe as everything that has been created, or perhaps you might say everything that in some way is part of the physical order. God is not part of the physical order in the sense that he himself is contained in it. He's outside the box, although we see in the incarnation, he can literally go inside the box should he so desire. And even the theophanies in the Old Testament. So God did create out of nothing. And so when you look at these opening words that we're discussing, I know we're talking about grammar and stuff, but just remember that this shows God's amazing wisdom, his sovereignty, his power, his control, his majesty. He is the creator of all things that exist. This is very different than other ancient Near Eastern accounts. I just want to draw that out. Before we go to the next one, any other questions or comments, Amir?
Well, just one thing. The guy he was interacting with, the Semiticist, he's not part of the conscious community. He does his own thing, just teaches people. Garfield convinced him to come on his show and have this discussion with Zion, and Zion thought, I'm going to school with this guy only to run into a buzzsaw.
Yeah, one of those situations.
Yeah, and the reason Zion is being so patronizing towards him is because the fellow claimed that he learned from internet mores, Instagram posts, Facebook posts, and other stuff on Google scholarship, but he was actually describing Zion's biography of Hebrew education.
Oh, so it's like a turnaround there. All right,
Yeah,
next
he's
clip.
sarcastic.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The literal meaning in Hebrew is Bereshit, which means in the beginning. Bara means he created. And I might throw you off with this, Sonetta. The next word is Elohim, which is God. So the first three words of the Hebrew Bible says, in the beginning, he created God. It doesn't say in the beginning, God created. Right.
So this, in essence, is part of the same kind of argumentation. Just here he's talking to Zion Lex. It's not in the context of the debate. So that's what's going on. Let me play the rest of this clip.
The literal meaning, I'm going word for word now. In the beginning, which is Bereshit, he created. Bara, the next word is Elohim. So what are we talking about? Because most people, when they think about the first opening line of the first book of the Bible in the first sentence, they think that it would read, because most people are just simply reading in English, in the
Again, Zion's constant insulting of everyone else. I mean, it's funny though. He's like, well, because I'm looking at the Hebrew, you guys are looking at the English, but it's like, well, okay, that's good, but to what end? To simply throw it away because the rules of grammar don't matter. I find this image interesting. I don't know if there's something I'm missing here, but there's a cross in front of the Genesis text. I just thought that was fascinating. Zion being a New Testament denier, he's got the cross there. But I'm going to play the rest of it. But Amir, what do you say?
I don't know if he caught it, but he literally just denied the English translation. In the beginning, God created. He's literally negating that particular interpretation of the text. And he's positing his interpretation as the actual interpretation of the text. But again, we just literally went through the grammar and syntax, saw that his interpretation doesn't make any sense.
Is he saying it should be in the beginning, essentially God created God, or he, like you said earlier, maybe some other God? Is he advocating for a self-created deity, which would be somewhat similar to what the Egyptians got going on, or is it more along the lines of Mormonism of Heavenly Father's father? I mean, I can't tell because that masculine pronoun, just he, doesn't. Well, who's the he there?
That's what I don't get. His interpretation entails that there's some higher being that created Elohim, God or gods.
You don't think it allows for a self-created deity? Although I recognize it's a contradiction. You don't think it allows for that?
No, the grammar does not allow it.
But grammar doesn't matter. That's a simple formalities being placed upon you. But you need to understand the esoteric interpretation. Don't you have common sense, Amir?
Well, if grammar doesn't matter, then I could literally say the Hebrew means the chicken created eggs. So.
Also, you've answered the age-old question. Thank you.
Beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But for those who understand Hebrew, and those who are reading the text in the original language, which is Hebrew, you know that's not the literal meaning when we go in word for word.
So you're reading it in the original language. Is that true, Amir?
Yeah, I'm literally reading the original language itself and following the dictates of the rules of the grammar. Zion is throwing the rules of grammar out for his interpretation, as you noted, to build bridges with the conscious community and trying to make it more alluring to get them away from chemicism.
I guess. Yes. Zion Lex is building bridges made of plywood and styrofoam over the Nile, and then he's trying to drive an Abrams tank over that bridge afterwards. This is going to result in a lot of people in the river.
The first word is bereshit, in the beginning. The second word is bara, he created. The third word is Elohim. In the beginning, he created Elohim. So what are we actually talking about here? Elohim is a creation within itself. Elohim is actually a title that is only significant with the advent of creation.
Okay. He just literally admitted that God is a created being. So, in other words, in the beginning, God created a demiurge.
Man, it really is Hebrew Israelite Gnosticism then. You know? You adding demiurges into it. This is bad stuff, man. This is pretty bizarre. I wonder if this is the kind of interpretation his teachers hold to.
I really don't know. He's getting this primarily from Jewish mysticism and the Zohar and all that, and it's interesting stuff. But yeah, it doesn't make sense grammatically here. But another note to about the trying to make it more appealing to the conscious community. He's trying to lure the conscious community with a hot chick, but it's actually a prostitute.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah, he's trying to sell them. I guess you could say he's trying to be a slick oil salesman here, trying to sell them a product by dressing it up, but it's actually very crappy in reality.
Well, okay, let's I mean, is there anything else you want to say about that? Because that's the extent of that clip. I can always play the clip again if you want. That was a shorter one.
Yeah, well, like he claims Elohim is a title. That is true. More particularly, it's a noun. It's a title. It means God, deity. Singular Elohim is the masculine plural of it, a majestic plural, particularly in this instance. The singular form is Eloah, and that derives from El, which is just generic for deity, God. Eloah is another variation of it. And we'll get into the singular form in a little bit, because he also makes a very problematic claim about that one as well.
Let me read something here, if I could, briefly from his book. It's just interesting to show his perspective on this. We don't necessarily have to comment on this, but this is from page 42. Coincidence, anyone? There are several creation myths throughout the world which share common denominators, yet the creation story of Egypt is meticulously crafted after Sumerian mythology. So notice there he's saying that the Egyptian myth is from Sumeria, first of all. From the names of the gods to the practices and to the very look, Egypt's gods are a complete replica of the gods of the Fertile Crescent. So, you know, they're saying that the Egyptian gods are a ripoff from Sumerian gods. Contrary to popular opinion, Egypt's culture is not that unique. and I guess he means popular opinion within the conscious community. Traces of Sumerian thought are replete throughout Egypt. This speaks not against Egypt, as it is more of a cultural testimony of the ways the ancients viewed Sumeria in the pagan world. Sumerians were known for wearing beards, like all of the Asiatic kingdoms of the Fertile Crescent. Beards were viewed in Mesopotamia as a sign of wisdom, power, and divine rulership. Egyptians, however, did not grow beards, yet because the influence of the Asiatic kingdoms was so fiercely revered in Egypt, we find that not only did Egyptian kings wear fake beards, but even Hatshepsut, I'm not going to pronounce those names properly, sorry, who is regarded as Egypt's first female ruler, is depicted in Egyptian art as wearing a beard as well, which again was clearly an Asiatic custom. We also find that in Sumeria, young boys wore long side locks. In fact, in the Sumerian creation story of man, the first man is depicted as coming forth as a boy with a side lock in his hair. The irony of this is that it was widely misunderstood that the practice of young boys wearing side locks is Egyptian in origin, when in fact young Sumerian and Akkadian boys were wearing side locks long before it was worn in Egypt. In the Sumerian creation story, the first created man was of adolescent age, around 12 or 13. In ancient Egypt, a young boy wore side locks until he became a young adult. Egypt practices, as seen in this treatise, thus far has far too many instances of direct correlation to much older Sumerian practices for it to be a coincidence. Even the justice system of Egypt has traces of Sumerian thought and mythology. From Ma'at, Egypt's law and order is said to be composed of 42 laws. Ironically, the gods of Sumeria, the Anunnaki, are said to be no less than 42 in number, some having more than one name or title, yet still 42 in title. And then it goes on from there. But it's sort of just, speaking about it, but there's not necessarily a lot of, it's a little bit difficult to find exactly what the point is, other than kind of to say that, these come from a shared mythology. But, fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it just sounds too much like parallel mania with his claim here, and it's really a Texas sharpshooter fallacy, and it's not really a valid argument. And claiming that Egyptian culture was not unique, that's very problematic because, one, just reading ancient Egyptian stuff, they had a very clear consciousness of their own identity, their own culture, their own practices and symbolisms, and so did Sumerians. And bear in mind, distance, were there interactions between the two? Yeah, there were, maybe. But saying one is one is derived from the other, that's a claim that is going to be extraordinarily difficult to demonstrate without really plugging in more assumptions than is necessary. And all you need to do is just posit a defeater, which requires the least amount of assumptions that no, one did not affect the other. Both developed on their own thing. And like you see that with the differences in the languages, as well as the deities they worshipped and etc. And I mean, it makes more sense it makes more sense in the converse hypothesis of what Zion is proposing, that no, this is not true. They both had their own thing in origin, development, over time, etc.
Read one more paragraph. Another coincidence, apparently, and coincidence is like that, is the bull worship originating in Sumeria. The ancient Sumerians depicted the bull as sacred and godlike. One of the most famous Mesopotamian sculptures is the Sumerian Sphinx. One depicted as a bull with a man's head. In Egypt, this becomes a lion with a human head. Bull worship is rampant throughout ancient Egypt, such as Apis the bull. In Sumeria, the bull came to symbolize strength, courage, power, and authority. Thus, in ancient Egypt, the bull plays a major role in Egyptian mythology as well. The strength of the bull symbolized divinity to the ancients, and throughout the ancient world, bull worship played an important role in virtually every culture. All right, let's continue on with this next clip. Here we go.
Ha-Sovev, which surrounds Eretz, the whole land, Kush. Well, let me guess. You don't know what Kush is, huh? Let me guess. You don't know what Kush is, huh? Well, I just clicked on the Hebrew word Kush, and it brought up the dictionary. And if everybody looks to the right of the screen, not only does it say Kush, but it relates in the dictionary that Kush is black. And so,
Real quick, everybody,
first
the sound
entry in
effects,
this
the sound effects, just in case people were wondering, because I play some sound effects too. For example, like that. You know, I play some sound effects every now and then. But those sound effects you're hearing are from Zion Lex. It's a common feature of his program, which I don't mind. You know, I don't trip. I understand whatever. But the man has got everything up. All his gains, all his meters must be redlining because everything's distorted. Instead of being at 11, it needs to be more like at 8. I think that'll benefit the microphone as well. But yes, Dinu, he is yelling at the dictionary.
Dictionary shows that Kush is black. It's a noun, proper name, masculine, right? The third entry says it's the name of a Benjamite mentioned only in the title of Psalms 7:1. So an Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin is called black or Kush in Hebrew. But let me guess, Michael Hess here.
Wait, Michael Hess here? That's okay. I mean, the name's Heiser, though. The name is Heiser. Also, this is when he's talking to Heiser. What's going on here?
This is when you were telling Heiser about the book from Babylon to Timbuktu, I think the name of it was.
From Babylon to Timbuktu by Windsor. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I told him it was a book that was not well sourced, which I have a clip. I'm gonna show that. Not in this show, but I have something for that. But go ahead.
Yeah, more particularly, it's when you mentioned the Ethiopia part, and Heiser was like, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how you associate Ethiopia with Eden. Because actually, you've read the book. I haven't. Is the author of that book entailing that modern day Ethiopia is in reference here in regards to Eden?
That's my understanding, but I think it's more along the lines of that Eden was in Ethiopia, not necessarily that it is in Ethiopia.
Okay.
That's my understanding. But I went through the book kind of once and a half. So I went completely through it and then through other parts again a second. But I want to go through it. Actually, I want to go through it one more time. I have some stuff I want to look at it in light of some of the conversation with Zion Lex. In fact, that was a question I said, look, Zion Lex said he wants to debate me. So I put a community post up yesterday. And one of the topics I said that we could debate was, since he claimed it was, is From Babylon to Timbuktu a scholarly book? Is it a scholarly work? That'd be something that could be interesting for us to debate, because he took, again, great offense that I said it was not well sourced. But yeah, you know, this is a common thing. Speak for a second. I'm going to actually get something that I want to show you real quick here, because I know where some of this is coming from. But go ahead. Speak. I'm going to step away.
Yeah. Like, it says it's Kush. Well, actually, hold on. Oh, yeah. Kol Eretz Kush, the whole land of Kush. And he's appealing to the dictionary on Safaria, and it defines it as Ethiopia. This is where, yeah. Well, the land of Kush, yeah, like the land of Kush itself, what Kush is having, like, this is a text written at a very specific point in time and place, and these people have very specific understanding of Kush in that period in time. And Vocab, what land of Kush do we know of that existed that ancient Israel would have had interaction with? Like, which Kush had a lot of gold and the Egyptians invaded to steal? Because, well, actually, this is another thing.
Can I show you something? Check this out. Sure. This relates to what we're talking about. So I have something called the Original African Heritage Study Bible. It has some interesting stuff, edited by Kane Felder. Yeah. And there's some commentary in this that is fascinating. And I want to show you this because this is a greater defense of what Zion Lex is talking about. So he's not the first person to say this. Just let me read the commentary here in the bottom of this book, if I could. This passage gives the exact physical boundaries of the garden located eastward in Eden. Genesis 2:10-14 gives the ancient names of the 4 rivers that actually encompass this special region. There are Pishon, Gihon, Blue and White Nile, Hiddekel, Tigris, and the Euphrates. The Nile River is the longest river system in the world. An early civilization was born along the banks of this river in Egypt. The Nile flows 4,160 miles. It is the only river in the world that rises near the equator and flows into the middle latitudes. It irrigates about 6,300,000 acres of land in Egypt and about 2,800,000 acres in Sudan and small areas in Ethiopia and Uganda. The Tigris River flows from southeast Turkey through Iraq, 1,150 miles, joining the Euphrates to form the Shatt al-Arab, which flows for another 120 miles to the Persian Gulf. The Euphrates rises in the mountains of Turkey and flows more than 1,700 miles to the Persian Gulf. The river runs southeast through the Great Plains of Syria and Iraq. It joins the Tigris River at Az-Quna, Iraq, about 120 miles from the Persian Gulf to form a river called the Shatt al-Arab. Western scholars, historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists have erroneously called the Mesopotamian basin the cradle of civilization. It is also referred to as the Fertile Crescent. Most contemporary maps of Africa show only the main body of the continent, with Suez Canal being its northeastern border. Prior to the building of the Suez Canal, 1859 to 1869, Africa perhaps extended to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. All this region was landlocked with the main continent. Ancient caravans once journeyed in these regions by foot, Genesis 46. Also must be pointed out that the original people of this region were black Africans and the mixed stock of Afro-Asiatics. Even today's contemporary scholars verify that the first people on the earth were of African descent. Scientific evidence was recently revealed that the earliest findings indicate that Eve lived in sub-Saharan Africa. The great anthropologist/paleologist Louis S.B. Leakey made important discoveries of the earliest and oldest fossil remains of man in eastern Africa. Notice, by the way, the adoption of evolution there. Therefore, it is logically reasonable to conclude that the original man, Adam, who was created in the image and likeness of God, was Africanic Edenic. And so there you have it being in Ethiopia, it appears, and that's the way that he gets to it. Although there's a lot of sort of superfluous commentary, to be frank with you, but Zion Lex is not the only one to propose something like that, and it has to do with the rivers. And if you listen to that, not you necessarily, but because you probably heard it already, if you listen very closely to that clip, when Heiser says, "I'm still trying to figure out how he got Eden in Africa or wherever," I say, I think he does it through the rivers. I specifically say that, but it's kind of when he in between us saying something, so you might not catch it. But I mentioned about the rivers there. Mm-hmm. But that's that. I think him saying that is less. Just to the audience, we got strata levels here. This claim is way less problematic than the anti-monotheistic claim that we were dealing with earlier. But go ahead, Amir.
Yeah, well, like Eden, it's in the Garden of Eden. It says that the springs that come forth, it also spring forth the Tigris and Euphrates. That is a long distance away from Ethiopia, so it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, unless you're going to say there was before the lands were broken apart over time, billions of years. But even then, that's still a problem because I don't know. It just seems like he's trying to match it up. Well, actually, yeah. I remember him going into the out of Africa theory. He seems to take a more of a concordist approach here in regards to that, like
in regards to science and what would be called, well, not really science, but an evolutionary understanding of the origin of mankind and Genesis. Is that what you mean by that? That they can go together?
Yeah, like he's trying to line up with Eden. Well, because evolution theory posits, well, more particularly out of Africa theory,
which is one. Just so everyone knows, out of Africa theory is not the only one. But go ahead. There's also multi-regional or whatever.
That out of Africa, humans spread from there, et cetera, and and he's looking at the Genesis account that humans begin in the Garden of Eden, and he's trying to correlate the two in that instance. Yeah, this is just really interpreting the text very anachronistically, though, because you're gonna have a hard time justifying that in light of the background of ancient Near East.
Which part? Which part specifically? What do you mean? Have a hard time justifying?
Well, it says that. Well, like I noted earlier, it says Tigris and Euphrates proceed out of the rivers of Eden, and that is literally in Mesopotamia. And well, Pishon, don't really know where that's at currently. It's been a while to look it up, but the geography is just like the geographic location. If you're trying to associate Eden with Ethiopia, okay, but it says these two rivers proceed out from it, and Ethiopia is literally a long distance away from where these rivers are at. So, it's gonna be it's just really basically the geography is a bit off. It's hard to justify in light of that, and also we know Kush. It's literally South Egypt and North Sudan, and that's still a bit off geographically of modern Ethiopia. If he's conflating with that, if he's going to say, well, the Septuagint translates Kush as I think it's Ethiopia in the Greek, if I'm not mistaken, but even then, it's still referred to a specific geography within that realm and frame. So, yeah, this is if he's saying this is modern Ethiopia, it's in reference to this is really a fallacy of equivocation.
Well, that is what he's trying to do. However, it's the case that no modern geographical feature matches exactly what is described here in Genesis 2, meaning on the planet today of Earth, there is nothing that is identical what's being described. And so usually people commonly say, they'll posit Iraq, like ancient Babylon, as the place where this was. But the thing is, that's not a guarantee either. I think I even said that one time, but it's really not 100% certain like that, because when you look at it, what's it describe? It describes one river that broke into 4 headwaters, and then you add that up plus the directions and places. Well, the directions and places that these rivers are said to flow, they don't match with anything on the planet Earth today. And so how is that? What is that the case? Now, I have a view everyone may or may not agree with, but I believe the answer, and so this is me speaking, not necessarily AMIR or anyone else. I believe the answer is the flood, rearranging things. The flood destroying any remnant of what would be known as the Garden of Eden, rearranging sediment, piling it up. The previous landscape, and that would include rivers here in Genesis, they would not be recognizable anymore. But then say, well, what about the place names and some of the features that still exist? Well, everything doesn't have to be totally rearranged, number one. And number two, just like when you go to the United States, there's places called, Versailles, which of course is in France, but there's a Versailles, Kentucky, and Ohio and Indiana. Well, you sometimes name a new place based upon an old place. And so you could have a situation where, say, let's say that there's some text or records that existed on the ark or whatever, however you'd want to look at it. And perhaps when Noah and the sons come, maybe they're naming places, maybe the name's stuck with places they knew before. And they're like, okay, this place is that place is that. But it's important to understand nothing matches exactly up. So, it's not like we're sitting over here saying, actually, it was in Europe or some ridiculous thing they a lot of times try to put on us. We're just saying it's more like we don't know exactly. It seems to not match anything identically. And so let's not act like we know when we don't. You want to add anything on that before I play the next clip? Oh, no, there's actually some time left on this clip. My bad. Let me play it.
That was based on the color of his eyes or his hair. The son of Ham, 4, and the grandson of Noah, and the progenitor of the southernmost peoples located in Africa, or the dictionary draws a correlation between Kush and sub-Saharan Africa. The fifth entry says the people descended from Kush. I'm going to just go straight to the seventh, which says the land occupied by the descendants of Kush, located around the southernmost parts of the Nile, i.e., Ethiopia.
Okay,
Hold
yeah.
on. I think he's missing something. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is where I think he was honing in on, and this is where he's relying on the dictionary, where it's identifying this particular, because Kush, as is noted in this dictionary, and actually what I'm looking at right now on Halot, it's actually a proper name, a topography, a name of a geography, and it's listed as Ethiopia. The problem is Kush, particularly in the ancient Near East, is literally South Egypt and North Sudan. So this is really just committing a fallacy of equivocation here. At least that's what I'm getting out of this. And see. Well, just to give an example. Actually, you probably know this, and BK Apologetics has touched on this as well. We literally have in the temple Luxor in Egypt, set by Ramses II, where you have an image of a bound person with, it's in the hieroglyphs. It says, Kush Chazet, vile, wretched Kush, and the determinative is in foreign land determinative. And that's really the only Kush that would be, this is my position anyway. I don't, the Kush that's being spoken of mind here is particularly that Kush. You see it, right, for example, because you also see it like in the rest of the Hebrew corpus of the interactions with Kush and reference to Kush, and that's the Kush that ancient Israel would have been more in contact with, because they're literally not that far off geographically.
Can you explain the significance of that, though, and how it's relevant to what Zion Lex is saying?
Well, it says right here, it's a little fuzzy, but the particular dictionary reference has in mind here, has it on the Nile River and the parentheses Ethiopia. I could be wrong, but it just seems to indicate, it just seems to be positing that this is in reference to modern Ethiopia. At least that's what I'm seeing from this. But the problem is modern Ethiopia and Ethiopia in the ancient world are two different things. Particularly Ethiopia in the Septuagint was in reference to Kush, and again, that's South Egypt, North Sudan, or basically where Nubia was.
So, yeah, I got some. Yeah, so, you look at this. So this is why, again, this is speculative, and I think we should always recognize that. But most scholars place where Eden would have been in the northern end of the Persian Gulf, and that is based upon the locations of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And then it says in the east, which in verse 8 there of chapter 2, which usually seems to indicate Mesopotamia. And I guess, according to the commentaries I've read on this, that this is typical of primordial narratives. And you see the flow of the rivers, Pishon and Gihon, but we're not really certain about their location. And so sometimes people look closer to the source of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And then what scholars try to do is maybe we can identify two other major rivers in the area that would qualify. But see, it's not, there's nothing definitive. And again, that's why, for me, I hold it's because of the rearranging of the flood that you cannot find it. It's not there anymore. And so, this place would have been a great place, especially speaking of the Garden of Eden prior to the flood, would have been a great plus. Especially imagine if it was like in a mountain regionous, kind of mountainous region. If it's like in an elevated valley, then you could have a situation where this is like a water garden. Humans do work in it, and and then life kind of springs up in it, and it's a beautiful picture there. And so you've got these fertile waters flowing, and it's interesting because in Egyptian texts you have strange things happen. There's somewhat of a parallel here, where in Egyptian texts you have two of the four rivers flowing out of the mouth of Nun, because he represents the cosmic abyss. And there's some similarities there in Assyrian depictions as well. And so, that's interesting. Now, I think that's because of a shared understanding of what really happened, although mythologized in the other Annie accounts. And so when we look and we try to find other rivers, I just don't think they match. Sometimes people will look at other rivers of Mesopotamia. So I got some here, Balik, Diyala, Zab, some of those. And then sometimes rivers outside of Mesopotamia, Nile, Indus, Ganges, or even larger bodies, or even the Red Sea, but it just doesn't match, and we have to say, okay, the Bible's mistaken, or there's something we don't know about antiquity, or again, if it's been rearranged, that would kind of answer it. And so, it's just the utter certainty when we're talking about speculation here. But I'm going to play the next clip unless you got something, Amir.
Well, just one thing. Would you note earlier that it's more particular with the mountain range and the mountains of within the Mesopotamian region? That would actually make more sense, because ancient Near Eastern understanding is that mountains is where the deities, the gods, resided, and that's what's associated with the Garden of Eden. So it would make sense within that realm in regard, the Kush being referenced here, because in Hebrew you can have words that have same homophone, but they have different reference in usage. So it could also be in reference to Kush, as in in Mesopotamia, Hindu Kush, etc., within that specific geographical territory and topography. So yeah, that would also make more sense. Basically, Zion is positing a proposition that Kush is here in Ethiopia. What we're positing is Kush in other different localities, particularly Mesopotamia, or more specifically within North Sudan, South Egypt. The issue, basically, what we're doing is positing hypotheses, and the hypothesis that has more that's best accounted for with the background data is what we're aiming for here. Because, again, we're looking for the hypothesis that has the least amount of ad hoc and more simplicity and more parsimony, and has a more accountability in regards to the probability of background data. And Zion's does not really account for that, particularly with this verse in mind that we just went through.
Yeah, if I could read one more thing. This is a cultural background commentary edited by Walton in regards to this question, and here's what it says, quote, "Recent investigations have attempted to identify the Pishon as a major river that dried up in antiquity. This possibility emerges from the analysis of sand patterns in satellite photography, which have revealed an old riverbed running northeast through Saudi Arabia from the Hijaz Mountains near Medina, which contains one of the richest gold mines in the region, to the Persian Gulf and Kuwait near the mouth of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. As mentioned in note on verse 10 through 14, others have identified the Pishon and Gihon as rivers in the area of Urartu. A final suggestion is that the Pishon and Gihon refer to the encircling cosmic waters. None of these options may be adopted with any confidence, though some are more plausible than others." And, this is kind of how scholars do things. And so this is a standard way to speak about this. And let's get into clip number 4.
Very much. What he just clearly said is matrinos lones is there to indicate the presence of a vowel. It is not there to indicate the presence of a compound word. That's why I said this is an asinine conversation, because he's walking you around circles in the language that most of the audience is unfamiliar with. So he can basically say anything that sounds intelligent to you, because he uses words like morphology, yet doesn't tell you that morphology talks about the evolution of words. He uses words like syntax, but doesn't tell you that syntax revolves around the way that sentences are constructed when we go into different languages around the world. He uses words like grammar, and he doesn't tell you it's the structure inherent within all language, but he just uses big words, and because most of the audience is dumbed down, they think that he has a point.
The constant insulting of everybody that listens to you. Zion Lex's audience, which is substantial, by the way. Zion Lex's audience must be gluttons for punishment, unless he compliments them for listening to him, as the source of the Gnostic information that you need. But I'm going to play the rest of that clip, but this is relating to a different thing. Give us some context here, Amir.
This is a clip from that same discussion you had with that Semiticist, and the Semiticist, he was responding to Zion in regards to his claim that the Hebrew word Hohma, the word for wisdom in Hebrew, Zion's claim is that this is a compound word of the triconsonantal roots is het, kaf, and kaf sofit. Or the final kaf, and it's also the interrogative pronoun ma, which is an interrogative pronoun meaning what. Like if I were to say to you, vocab, vocab, what are you doing? That's what it
I was
means.
talking to this guy on YouTube.
Yeah, but yeah. And he was running through Zion why this claim makes absolutely no sense grammatically, because if this is true, then when Hohma goes through inflection or change, like say it's being put in a construct state or it's taking on a plural, that hey is not supposed to drop. It's not to be exchanged for the tav, which is what happens with feminine nouns that have a hey at the end as an indicator of the final vowel. Because Hochma is a feminine noun, and the hey at the end indicates the final syllable, the final A class vowel. It's not a consonant. And when you see it put in the construct state, feminine nouns that have that hey at the end is the indicator of the vowel, or the matre lectiones or matres lectiones, if you want to pronounce it. Yes, anyway. Basically, when that noun goes through the construct state, that hey is dropped, particularly feminine singular construct state. It is literally dropped for the tav as the construct. And when it's in the construct plural feminine, it goes with the common feminine plural ending, the cholem vav in the tav. So that behavior and pattern only makes sense if Hochma is not a compound noun, but is a feminine noun derived from the triconsonantal root Chacham, meaning to be wise, to be skilled, etc. So that's what. And the person was explaining this to Zion and to the audience, that this final hey is not a consonant. It's a matres lectiones, a vowel indicator. And Zion was not listening and gaslighting and mispronounced it as madres los lunas. Oh, no. Sorry. He mispronounced it as madres años lunas.
Like Spanish?
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Well, do you think that means that he had never heard about it before?
No, he hasn't. I don't know if you watched that entire discussion, but I recommend everybody watch that discussion. You'll notice Zion, after everything that Smith has said, a lot of what that Smith said, Zion's response, in the way he was responding and what he was saying, it was pretty clear Zion wasn't understanding anything he was saying. Like he was misunderstanding it and misrepresenting what the guy actually stated, and then he retorts to like you familiar how people, when they're at their epistemic limit, they get more aggressive and more ad homish? That's exactly what Zion does in this clip and in the rest of that discussion. It starts getting more ad homish, more aggressive, more gaslighting, and accuses the individual of using big words to confound his audience who are ignorant of the language.
Isn't that an odd thing for Zion to accuse someone else of doing when he frequently distracts the audience by kind of Hebrew grandstanding, you know, in regards to an understanding of the language? It's just strange for him to make that accusation against someone else.
Yeah, that's it's just gaslighting.
Well, let's play the rest of this clip. See what we got.
If you listen carefully to what he said that Latin rule that he just mentioned is there to indicate the presence of a vowel. We are not talking about vowels here. We're talking about root consonantal words. We're looking at etymology. We're not talking about vowels. The conversation we're having is, why does Zion Lex say that the Hebrew word for wisdom, Hohma, is a compound word? That has nothing to do with the presence of vowels. So why the hell are we discussing a Latin rule? But again, people are so dumbed down and so biased in their agenda on hating on others that they'd rather listen to nonsense than really listen to what a person is saying. Because if you're listening to what he's saying, he's literally said it's there to indicate the presence of a vowel. That's not my argument. My argument is that the word Hohma in its etymological base is a compound word. He still has not addressed how it's not a compound word. He's running you around circles. By the way, that's called a circular argument.
Hold on. That's not what's called a circular argument. Circular argument is where you assume the premise, or assume the conclusion in the premise. It's not running someone around in circles.
Yeah, it's just saying that the premise is true because the premise is true. Yeah. That's a circular argument. The other subset would be assuming the conclusion is the first premise, but not accounting for that with premise 1, premise 2, then conclusion. In that instance, it would be question begging the question. So Zion is misusing logical fallacies without understanding what they actually are here.
Yeah, well, I mean, we recently did a video. Well, I put it up. BK and Adam did it, where it was titled "Watch Zion Lex commit the genetic fallacy in real time," and that's what happens. Okay, so anything else you want to bring out about that clip? I mean, doesn't seem like there was a lot accomplished there, but you're getting a flavor of this. And actually, since there's a question of Matras Lectionis, can I show something here to you, Amir, where it seems like he made a mistake in that area? Are you ready for this? Here we go.
The thing that I found was most interesting, first of all, he doesn't know how to say his chaz, so he just says ka, which if you're actually trying to speak Hebrew and you say ka instead of cha, well, it's just going to destroy your ability to speak. And what he had on the splash screen at the very beginning, it's written Israelim, right? Except it's miswritten. I mean, it doesn't have an aleph in Israel. And then, so you write Hebrew differently if you're writing with or without the nekudot, the vowels. So unvocalized Hebrew, when there's a chirik, you'll sometimes put two yuds right after each other. And so apparently he took somebody else's thing and then put the vocalization on it because it was double. It had the double yud and the vocalization. It's like, that's the type of thing that somebody who doesn't really know the language won't recognize.
Are you saying like what is it, Matros Lectionis? He had that plus?
Yes.
That's a redundant mistake then.
Yes.
You need one or the other.
Yes.
So he did that.
Well, I don't know where he got the actual.
But he was still putting that forth. You wouldn't do that if you knew really what you were doing.
Yeah. You would not do that.
Can you show me where that is in the video? I mean, I'm not saying right now. I don't know. I'm just saying that'd be fascinating to see because it's like, look, if you're going to put yourself out there, you're going to get caught on stuff. But if you're just chill about it, it's not a big deal. But he's not very chill about it. So that's a fascinating mistake. I'm not even sure if he knew about the. There's evidence that indicates he didn't really know much about using consonants as vowels until recently. We might talk about this Friday.
Yeah.
So that to me talking to Jacob, who's a Mizrahi Jew, not an Ashkenazi, everyone, not a European Jew, but this is a Jewish man whose family originates in, as far as, where they ended up at, Persia, Iran. And we're having a discussion. And what happened is, in this conversation, he invited me onto his show. He brought up Zion Lex. I didn't know we were going to talk about that. He just wanted to talk about Hebrew Israelism. I said, sure. I didn't know anything about the guy. I just said yes. Come to find out, he's just a nice guy. I just kind of met him. He doesn't believe the New Testament, for example. He doesn't hold that Jesus is the Christ. So obviously there's differences. But we had some interesting discussions about Hebrew and stuff. And, I think he'll be okay with this. I messaged him and said, you need to also be careful with how you discuss the culture and your critiques. You got to be careful with some of this and what you say, because some of this is new to him outside of his lane. So there are some problematic statements that he made, and he knew that, and I think he's willing to learn. But nonetheless, it was important because he pointed that out to me. And then AMIR, he showed it on the screen. So I'm going to show this, and then I want to get your reaction. This is from that discussion. So this is Vocab Live in the blue hat, and the Vocab in the red hat is the one from a couple days ago we're watching. Here we go.
You'll see the Hebrew there. It says Ivrim Israelim, right?
So you're saying the very cover image itself?
Yeah. That's the cover image.
Yeah, I recognize the cover image. I thought it was somewhere buried in the video, so it's out front and center.
Oh no, it's right at the beginning. And you'll notice that Ivrim, right, has two yuds, even though there's a hirik male under the resh. So yeah, that's and there's a dagesh in the bet, which would make it Ibrim, not Ivrim. So there shouldn't be a dagesh in the bet, and there. Either you do the mater lectionis, like you said, the double yod, or you do the nikudin, but you don't do both.
Right.
And then Israelim doesn't have an aleph there. So it's Israel, not Israelim, right? And he's just missing the aleph as well. And yeah, I mean,
how many errors is that in 2 lines?
Three errors in 2 lines. Yeah.
That's got to be some kind of a record.
Okay, so AMIR, that was from the conversation. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I saw this yesterday, the day before. Yeah, he's right. Well, I was also listening to Zion's take on this. He claims he was just making this off the fly, and just to be charitable to Zion, let's just grant him that. Okay, Zion. If this is true, then you really need to update the thumbnail here in this video. But yeah, the problems with the grammar, for one, there's a dagesh, the dot, where it says, like the bait right there where it's supposed to say Ivarim. You'll see the dot in there, that's a dagesh. It's a weak dagesh indicating a rough or strong pronunciation of the bait. That is not supposed to be there. And there's 2 yods. That's not supposed to be there. There's only supposed to be 1. And where it says Yisraelim, the aleph is missing, and there's a tzere under the resh when there should be a shva, and there should the aleph. There's supposed to be where the aleph is supposed to be between the resh and the lamed. There's supposed to be a tzere under that. A tzere is a E-class vowel. Under the aleph, but I'm just assuming for just to be charitable, to be gracious, that Zion was making us off the fly and did make a mistake, not deliberately.
Well, I mean, of course it wasn't deliberately. And I understand we want to be charitable, but everybody, we know if you know English, I imagine you know some English if you're watching this. Although we do have people from all over the world who watch, so shout out to folks who may not have English as their first language or may understand a little of it. Shout out to y'all wherever you are at. Imagine though, I'm trying to think of a close analogy that you grab something and it was a sentence that was supposed to be a question mark for your title, but you just copied and pasted it from somewhere. But the thing that you grabbed was an exclamation point at the end of it, right? And so there's an exclamation point at the end of the sentence that was supposed to be an interrogative sentence, a question mark. And you put that up on your thumbnail. And then there was supposed to be quotation marks around the sentence is what it was supposed to have. But instead of quotation marks, let's say it was a quote, what you grabbed, what you copied and pasted, we're going to say, had parentheses instead. And so you had the sentence where it's got parentheses instead of quotation marks, and it's got an exclamation point instead of a question mark. And I could go on trying to give, small examples to try to understand. And if you want to get even smaller, let's say that you had a lowercase I in there, but when you copied and pasted it, your lowercase I was missing the dot, therefore making it look like an L. No halfway proficient English speaker would make would grab it without recognizing those mistakes right away. And notice I'm pointing to trying to point to small things in English that have to deal with not the letters themselves, like smaller things. You could say, okay, a small thing, right? To try to explain, like, yo, how would you do that though? You would know. And look, what we're saying here is charging people $300 for a Hebrew course and constantly beating opponents over the head about knowing Hebrew, and then getting mad when someone else uses technical language, is strange behavior when you're making these kinds of mistakes. And notice, also and especially if you're not knowing about Matras Lecciones, I mean, my goodness. And it appears maybe he doesn't, because otherwise you wouldn't have had this redundancy going on. I mean, these are important matters. And then you see, even when he does know the grammar, he's willing to throw it away in favor of an esoteric interpretation that does not obey the rules of grammar. We're dealing with massive problems, methodology, and attention to detail here, folks. We just need to draw that out. The reason why is because Zion Lex draws people away to his own individual teaching, to have them look at the Old Testament and deny Jesus as the Messiah, deny the gospel, affirm what he holds to, which is ultimately not even monotheistic biblical belief. This is very fundamental. Amir.
Yeah. Like, if you're not familiar, again, this is problem with Zion's claim that he's an authority, in particular in this issue of the language. If you're making mistakes, grammatical mistakes, and you're not familiar with terminology and grammar syntax, and also the problem with the esoteric interpretation, you're throwing the grammar out, then what you're really communicating, what you're basically implying is that the Hebrew language is unintelligible.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going to throw out the grammar in regards to the text, because what makes a sentence or anything in literature intelligible is the grammar and the syntax. If you're throwing all that out, you're literally just making what you're saying utterly unintelligible in regards to the text, and that's literally incoherent nonsense. Because the author of the biblical text was writing in a language and was read aloud to the people that could understand the language. So that entails that what is being read aloud is intelligible, yet what you're proposing is negating that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, again, it's incoherent nonsense. And
I mean, how could Adam and Eve be held accountable for the command that Yahweh gives in the very beginning, the one negative command, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? I could see them saying, well, we understand that he said that, but if you understand the esoteric meaning of what he just said, it actually means we're supposed to eat it. And here's the reason why. And there's actually been Gnostics who have actually said that. So I'm going back into ancient church heresy, where they actually taught that this God, this demiurge of the Old Testament, was actually sort of a cosmic buzzkill, joy kill buzz, whatever, and that he was trying to hide something from them, much like what Satan himself was saying in regards to that. He knows that your eyes will be open, becoming a God, that kind of thing. And so that actually Eve is a hero of the story, and in that she went against almost a sort of her oppressor in a way to reach out for knowledge that was granted to her. And this petty god got mad about it, and he did X, Y, Z. There are versions of that play upon the creation narrative that actually do say that kind of thing. My point is, like, how do we know that's not wrong on this kind of misunderstanding? I mean, this is a big deal. And can you reiterate one time? I want people to understand, you know, because it gets kind of technical in regards to what he put. This is his cover image. This isn't an image he brought up, but, you know, this was the cover image. And it's ironic because it's like, you know, this is supposed to be basic knowledge for y'all of that. I mean, I don't know if people understand that, because we didn't really explain what Matras Lexionis is, but basically now we have Nicodot, these little dots, little vowel pointers. But there was a time way back then, everybody, where the Paleo-Hebrew, you didn't have that. And so the readers supplied it because they knew. And somewhere in between there was a system that was, we're going to use the consonants because it's consonantal system and clean up any of my mess if I don't explain it properly. And that's why I have you on. I'm trying to do my best and then hand it back over to you. Where you use the consonants themselves in a way that now we have an established system that we use them to show or indicate a vowel using consonants. And so you wouldn't use the Nicodot and Matras Lexionis both, because they're saying here's the vowel, but why would you have both in there? So you want to add a little more detail, because I want to make sure people understand what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Basically, Matras Lectionis, literally the mother of all readings. That's just basically a way of saying its use of consonants as indicator of vowels. Like to give a perfect example, I believe it's the Boule of Uzziah, if I'm not mistaken, or Hezekiah. I forget which one. In the Phoenician, because at that point Hebrew is still using the Phoenician script, and the name Yehuda in your biblical text in the Hebrew, it's Yod, He, Waw, Dalet, and He. But in the Boule, it's Yod, He, Dalet, He.
Can you explain what the Boule is, though? People might not understand what you're referring to as far as Hezekiah's Boule.
It's a seal impression by the king or servant of the king, something like that. Archaeology is a bit rusty, but yeah, that's basically what it is.
Written during Hezekiah's time, and it uses Matras Lexionis.
Either Hezekiah or Uzziah. No, it doesn't use Matras Lectionis at that point.
Oh, you're saying it's not there yet. It's still in the old version prior to that. Sorry.
Yeah, it was before the update in orthography and the way things are written. Yeah, back then they didn't the vowels. Every language has vowels, and those vowels have variation and variety, and how they're pronounced, how long they're pronounced, and how weak or strong or short, etc. They were there. They were just not literally written. It's later with the update in orthography. You start seeing the presence of consonants being indicated. Those vowels, like in the example of Yehuda, you have the vav in between the he and the dalet, and that's the indicator of the kibbutz, the u class vowel, and basically Yehuda. And you have the hey at the end of feminine nouns as an indicator of the final syllable A class vowel. And you also have the yod functioning as the indicator of the long I class vowel. Basically, their Matras Lectionis is basically a term to indicate the usage of consonants as vowels, particularly with the Hebrew system.
Excellent, thank you. Let me see.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I don't. I mean, yeah, I'm guessing the rest of the Nikudot are correct, but you know, I was actually more bothered. Like, I'm listening to him and I'm trying to follow along, and he said something that sounded really crazy, and then so I actually rewinded. And I'm like, this sounds really crazy. I don't understand what he's saying, and I kept on going, and then he lightly afterwards he's like, oh, I made a mistake there, and then kept on going.
Oh, like, so you're saying it was incomprehensible to you, and you kept on trying to figure out what is he saying, and then later on he goes on and he says I made a mistake, so that's why it was incomprehensible to you.
But yeah, because it was so he was
literally speaking gibberish at that point.
But yeah, so
he's talking about his Hebrew, by the way, everybody, not English.
What he was saying was he first he said that it never talks about the God of the Hebrews when Moses and Aaron talk to Pharaoh, and then he reads where it says God of the Hebrews, and it says God of the Israelites right there, right? And it's using both. And I'm like, what is he saying? And I rewound to find out what he was saying again. And then later he goes, yeah, I misspoke there. It's like, hello. Why are you like? Yeah, so I did a whole commentary. I don't know if it's worth your time to actually watch it, but he
Sounds like it might be, actually. Sounds like it might be.
Hey, if you want to have me on your show, I'm just offering. But
well, evidence, by the way, this was on his show, not mine.
I'll ask you this because I'm interested in that.
And the question I ask him there is, what's your opinion of gematria? Now, we don't have time to get into that, but that's an important discussion. All right, we got 2 images left to show on the screen. Do you want to explain these, Amir, or do you want me to go to that other image first?
Well, since we're touching on this particular, well, you already have the image up in regards to Hohma. This is going back to that. Yeah, let's jump to this one right here, the Hohma part, because again, Zion's claiming that Hohma is a compound noun of hachach and ma. He's claiming this is a behavior of Hebrew. But there's a problem. We literally have a cognate in Ugaritic, and that's hakmatu.
Real quick. Since there's a lot going on here, can you define briefly cognate and then explain why Ugaritic is significant? That may be lost on the audience. Real quick, if you can.
Cognate is word similarities from within, like, say, a language family, something like that. And Ugaritic is a Northwest Semitic language like Hebrew, and it's very, very close to it. Same, you find similar root similarities with it in the verbs and also nouns, and also it has similar words and similar with Arabic as well. And because Hebrew is a dialect of Canaanite, and so it's going to be more similar to, say, Phoenician and Ugaritic, since those languages are more closer in relation, and that entails that since that's the entailment, it also entails that the words are going to have similarities, and also like you're going to see the same words just in similarities, and also particularly in usage. And particularly with Hohma, you have the same thing in particular for the word for wisdom, only it's slightly a little different.
And there you hear the similarities with Hebrew and Arabic, because today you will often hear, say, in imams talk about the hikmah of Allah, the hikmah, and that has to do with the wisdom of Allah. And in fact, Sam impersonated an imam doing that in Islamicizing. He gets on talking about the hikmah, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's a hikmat Allah, because again, it's a feminine noun, and the Talmud Buta, that's also an indicator of the A-class vowel, but if it's in the construct, because it'll be hikmah in Arabic just by itself in the absolute state. In the construct, it'll be hikmat.
Anything else you want to comment about what's on here before we go to our last image?
Yeah, this is the Ugaritic for the word for wisdom. In Hebrew, it's Hohma. In Ugaritic, it's hakmatu. In the nominative singular feminine case. All
right, here we go to the last one. All right, it's on the screen. I've made it as big as possible. They don't even know. That's all they're seeing. Break it down.
Okay, this image is from Bruce Walke and Michael O'Connor's An Introduction to Biblical Hebrew Syntax. This particular part is in regards to epicene nouns.
What is that?
Epicene nouns are nouns like they're basically nouns that are feminine that also function, for instance, in regards to a feminine subject. Because in ancient Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, like other Canaanite dialects, and it's actually right here in the image, they didn't have a specific word for a female deity or a goddess. So because of that, they used the masculine in regards to it. And you see it right here at the bottom of the and Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess or the godhead of the Sidonians. The reason this is relevant is because Zion Lex made a claim that Elohim is plural for the feminine noun Eloah. Elohim is the noun in the masculine plural. The emending indicates a masculine plural. He's claiming that the singular form Eloah is feminine. The reason I'm bringing this to play because there are two ways to try to argue this. Argue it's an epicene noun. You can argue it that way, but you're going to have a hard time justifying why it's preceded with masculine singular third-person nouns. With verbs, with third-person masculine singular verbs. That doesn't make sense in light of that. And the other is the adjectives. Even if the noun is an epicene, the adjective that is either attributive or predicate, it's going to agree with the intrinsic nature of the subject. Say it's a female deity that's part of this epicene noun. That entails that the adjective is going to be in the feminine form. So that's a problem with that. And the other problem with claiming Eloah is a feminine noun. It's assuming, for that to be true, that would entail that the he in Eloah is a matre electionis, the indicator of the vowel. And there's a problem, because feminine noun, to argue that is to say that Elohim is an irregular plural. It's a feminine noun that's taken on a masculine plural. But there's a problem with that claim, though. If that he is a matres electionis and it's taken on masculine plural, then that he is supposed to be dropped because it's a matres electionis, not a consonant. But that is not what we see when it undergoes inflection into the plural state. The he is still there, and that only makes sense if that he is not a matres electionis but is a consonant. And that only makes sense if the noun is a masculine noun, not a feminine one.
And so this relates to, because we didn't play the clip, so people might need to be caught up on what claim Zion Lex makes that you're essentially refuting here.
It's in particular claim he made in his discussion with Polite on Sana's channel, where he tries to argue that, where he claims that the word Elohim is from the feminine noun Eloah. It's in response to that particular claim, and we just went and why that claim makes no sense, because the he is not dropped at all. Because if you have a feminine noun that has that he as matres electionis, that he drops when it undergoes inflection into either construct or a plural state. But it's not dropped, and that makes sense only if it's a masculine noun that he is a consonant. And the epicene doesn't make sense because in the epicene, and the way to argue it with the epicene usage doesn't make sense because that entails the adjectives have to be feminine, but they're not. And that only makes sense if the subject, Elohim, is masculine in that instance.
I'm going to actually read part of that from his book, since we didn't necessarily play the clip. Let me show this in regards to his claim about Elohim. Okay. For instance, this is on page 13 of It Was Written Engraved. For instance, the Hebrew word for God is Elohim, which in Hebrew is a masculine plural noun. The first part, El, or Eloah, is a singular form of the term for God. In Hebrew, the word El literally means power or energy, as it is written, which in English reads, "It is in the power of my hand," Genesis 31:29. In this passage, the word for power is El, which is the singular form of the Hebrew word for God. Now that we can see that the literal meaning of the Hebrew word for God is power or energy, we can now understand what the Torah means when it says that male and female together comprise the image of God. For we know that there is a positive polarity of energy and a negative polarity of energy, which in the language of the Torah is termed male and female. And then he goes on to say this. Oh, this is actually, there's a couple things in here about what he says about Elohim. I don't know how far I should go with this. The last part of the Hebrew word for God includes the Hebrew letters Yod and Mem, which acts as a pluralizing suffix. This is essentially the aspect of the Hebrew word for God, which causes confusion to those who are unfamiliar with Hebrew syntax or grammar. As if that matters, right? So the argument by those unfamiliar with Hebrew is, since the Hebrew word for God used throughout the first chapter of Genesis is Elohim, which in essence is a masculine plural word, then follows that Elohim more properly indicates more than one God, gods, since it stems from a plural noun. The first problem with this unfounded premise is that it has no base in Hebraic syntax. When the Torah speaks of God as Elohim with a masculine plural, the pluralization indicates immeasurability, not multiplicity, as it is written. To whom will you liken me and compare me to that we should be equal, Isaiah 40:25. You see, biblical Hebrew grammar and syntax is unlike the language that we speak today. Therefore, in attempting to interpret it, we must first divorce our minds from the grammatical rules of every other language we know and speak. Yet, taking a look at Genesis 1:1 again, when we encounter the Hebrew word Elohim, the masculine plurality inherent in its structure denotes all of the creative attributes inherent in creation. From the point of view of science, these attributes are termed nature, hence the saying Mother Nature. Yet from a purely Hebraic perspective, what is viewed as the forces of nature is termed God or Elohim. Hence the Hebrew word for nature, which is hateva, is numerically equivalent in Hebrew to the word God or Elohim, which is 86, and in Hebraic thought, two words which share numerical equivalence are said to share in conceptual meaning. And then I'm going to stop there for now, but just a little bit more about what he says there, and in relationship to the word Elohim. There's a lot there, and I think I'll stop reading from the book for now.
Yeah, I've heard that before from him, and also I've heard it from those who subscribe to Orthodox Judaism, or a variation of it, that Elohim derives from means power or judge, but this is really playing a homophone similarity. Consonantally, they use the same consonants and they have the same vowel, but the two are not derived from each other. This is just, you can have a similar morpheme and homophone, but their value and usage and what they're referring to are entirely different things. And this goes back to also the cognate similarity, particularly with Ugaritic. We literally have the same cognate in Ugaritic, and the Ugaritic word is ilu, and that simply means God, deity, or it could also be a proper noun for the Canaanite deity El. So what do you do with that? It doesn't mean power in that instance. It's just basically playing. He's basically getting. I think he's also getting this from this etymological dictionary he keeps showing as well. I forget what it was by, but it takes a triconsonantal root, and it's the guy tries to argue that all these other words are derived from this. But I mean, you could argue that, but you're going to have a hard time explaining cognate similarities with other Northwest Semitic language families, like Phoenician and Ugaritic. And the word El, in reference to deity, it only makes more sense if it's from the cognate similarity Ilu from Ugaritic and Il in Phoenician.
All right, excellent. Putting some of the live chat comments on the screen there. And, we don't have time to get into this, but pages 8 through 10 of Zion Lex's, it was written and engraved. And take this as you will. Some people will agree with it. I'm just telling you. He affirms the Big Bang, which, okay, it affirms the Big Bang. But then here in pages 62, 63 of The DNA of Sound by Zion Lex, It actually affirms, it appears, evolution. Let me read this, and it'll be the last thing I read from Zion Lex. The Torah seems to agree with science in some respect, as the very first animals the Torah speaks of are aquatic, Genesis 1:20, known in evolutionary science as amphibians, who, according to modern science, all life on Earth is derived from. While in the ancient Hebrew pictograph, the letter nun is depicted both as fish and sperm, and in a science lab, sperm are said to swim and even resemble fish. Thus, the letter nun also denotes the soul, nefesh, and neshama in Hebrew, and the emergence of life. I'll leave the pronunciation up to AMIR. The letter nun is the initial letter in the Hebrew word for stream or river, which is har. It also denotes light, as we saw above. Therefore, nun is also the initial letter in the word hara, which means shining light. A flashing bright light is called noga. The word which indicates a downward flow of river is nazal. It's related to the English word nozzle, again indicating the source of flow or water. The word used to denote the act of anointing through the pouring of liquid is nasek, from where we get the term nasik, which literally means prince. Nun seems to indicate both water and light, which ironically are the two things which the Torah always describes itself as. The numeric equivalence of nun is 50. Water is life-giving. We were literally birthed in water. Light is also life-giving. Without light, the Earth's ecosystem would collapse. The nation of Israel received the Torah on Mount Sinai exactly 50 days after the Exodus, for the Torah, which is described as both water and light, is life-giving, without which we absolutely cannot live. Man's soul is nourished by the light of Torah, from whose waters we find true sustenance. Without the Torah, man is like a tree with no light nor any water, destined to fade away. Yet, when the spirit of man is cultivated with the light of the Torah, God's teachings, he can now grow as tall as a palm tree, which bears fruit and provides shade. Now, the reason why I bring that up is just to show some of the gematria going on there, as well as the acceptance of apparently evolutionary theory in regards to what he holds.
Yeah, I mean, the Hebrew word nahar just simply means river. Like, it does not represent something kind of, you know, yeah, this is just him going off esoteric interpretation, but again, how is the word used and what is the semantic value of it is what we're trying to get at when we're trying to read and interpret the text, and that literally makes no sense. Like, what is that?
Well, I agree, and we probably got to end there. I appreciate your time and expertise in this, AMIR. One book I'm going to recommend, which is a little bit different than what people may think that I may talk about here, is actually a book called The Tower of Babel. This only relates to one thing we talked about, the Garden of Eden thing, but it's called The Cultural History of Our Ancestors by Bodhi Hodge. Has some interesting, fascinating discussion about a lot of things in early Genesis there, including a small discussion on Garden of Eden and things related to that. I found it interesting, whether you agree with it all or not. And of course, you can pick up Zion Lex's books on Amazon. I have 4 of them. He advertises 2 others, but I haven't seen them available. Didn't really look at this one today with you, but called Matriarchs of the Covenant. There's that one. Star of David Controversy. There's that one that he has. And he doesn't use Zion Lex as the name, but if you search in Amazon, you'll still be able to find it.
Abdel Ben Levi, yeah.
The DNA of Sound. And it was written and engraved. This is another one I said I wanted to debate him on, kind of the essence of it here. And notice how 2 of the titles, right there in the subtitle, have the word esoteric. Fascinating. So that's what's up. Final words, AMIR. Maybe you want to tell people how to check out your stuff online, or where you traffic at, or anything like that, or what you got going on, man. Let people know, man.
Well, you can find me on Twitter, DulasCristo7. My YouTube channel is same as my name, AMIR ESHAFRAH. I post from time to time on there. Well, my last bit of content was particularly exposing a cult leader of a Gnostic cult. I'm going to be posting more content on that.
The Petro guy?
Yeah, Michael Petro. Stay away from him, and if you have know anybody that is subscribed to us, that listens to anything he says, get them away from him as quick as possible. The guy's literally a doomsday cult leader. And yeah,
awesome.
maybe. And And also I'll be posting some content on other subjects like Near East and responding to other arguments by certain Hebrew Israelites, potentially, maybe Zion, maybe also IUIC. And yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing somewhere along the line. And other than that, I'm going to be getting back into finishing up Hebrew, Greek, and also Ugaritic.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining today on this Friday night. And everyone, I'm going to be doing a live stream tomorrow. Check it out. It'll be 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Shelton Henderson. He was a former member of the congregation that F.S. Cherry started, who was one of the founders of Hebrew Israelism. Not the first guy, as sometimes is promoted as, although you'll see that claim. I believe that's a false claim, and we might get into that tomorrow. But one of the early guys, and definitely a significant figure in the movement any way you look at it. You got Christian, Crowdy, and Cherry. And actually tomorrow night, or maybe on Sunday, I'm going to be going over a very early book by Crowdy, written all the way in 1902. I already covered the Christian book, which was from 1896. So getting into some history. But we're going to talk with Sheldon Henderson. He went to F.S. Cherry's congregation. He was actually born a year before Cherry died. And so grew up in the group there in Cherry's shadow. And he's going to share some interesting things. Now, it's produced in him the state where he is now an atheist. So I understand that about him coming on. But he has a lot of good information and seems to be someone we can build and grow and learn some important historical things from, being that he is 60 and he's seen a lot and looked into a lot. So that'll be a fascinating conversation here tomorrow on Street Apologist. So thank you very much, Amir, for joining us. And with that, we're out. Come back where we try to make apologetics fun again. You know.
Turn your radio up. Whoa. Radio time. Whoa. You're now listening to Street Apologist.